Well, good morning and welcome once again to ELEVENSES. I'm Kevin Williams of Survival Skills Rider Training, and this is my twice weekly webcast. It's Wednesday, the 17th of August. This is show number 264, and I've got, as usual, a fairly packed show for you today of news and opinions and a riding tip right at the end as well. So stay with me for the next 30 minutes or so whilst I work my way through today's content. Don't forget, if you have a comment, a question, anything you want to say, basically drop me a line during the show. I'll try to get back to it if I possibly can. If I can't, I will respond after the show goes off air. Sometimes questions require a slightly more complicated answer and I have to answer them off air. Right, so what are we covering today? Well, first things first, just a quick reminder that you can come and meet me at the Emergency Services Day at the Route 1066 Cafe tomorrow. Flooded roads as the drought ends, new safety rating for e-step scooters and e-bikes, and Grant Shapps has proposed speed limits and tougher penalties for cyclists. Actually, that's the first story of the day. Social media firestorm as a leather-clad biking dad gave a pillion ride to his young daughter who was wearing what one comment described as pajama bottoms. Sidecar options from MASH might have been an alternative to taking the bike there. Coventry-based Mutt have 19 bikes in their 250 range, and I kind of ask why. You may get the answer as we go along. Actually, they're not Coventry-based, they're Birmingham-based. I'm not sure why I put Coventry there. And finally, today's better biking tip. What we'll be looking at are the most common bike crashes, and we'll be starting with the number 10 in the charts. So settle yourself down with a cuppa and stay with me for the next 30 minutes or so. Right, okay, so firstly, the news then. Well, the 40-day drought finally broke here in London on Monday evening. It was enough rain, in fact, to form puddles in my gazebo roof. And then it rained again for about an hour or so yesterday lunchtime, which was just long enough for me to dash outside, wash the rather filthy camper down, and have the rain wash the soapy and dirty water clear. So I now have a nice, well, nicer looking camper again. Now, others weren't so lucky, and there has been significant flooding in various parts of the country. Midlands, I believe, has been particularly badly hit. So if you are out on the bike later, do watch out for standing water and debris, and there's likely to be mud and sand washed into the road in places too. Today, the forecast is for some slow-moving and torrential downpours, possibly with thunder built in, moving into the southeast. There's nothing much showing on the radar as I looked earlier, about an hour ago, but it has clouded over noticeably here. It's not quite as sunny as it was. But don't be caught out. It is likely to be very wet, and the ground is still not soft enough to soak up a lot of the rain quickly, so it will cause flash flooding. So bear that in mind. The other thing I just wanted to say is I'll put a poster up for you. Emergency Services Day, that is tomorrow between 11 and 2. It's happening at the Route 1066 Cafe, which you'll find on the A21 down near Robertsbridge, which is in the general direction of Hastings if you're coming out of London. It's on from, as I say, 11 till 2, so I'll be there talking about the science of being seen. So if you do get the chance, do pop along, and hopefully you will be able to enjoy something about my show. Now I've just clicked on the... I've just lost the plot here on the button that I wanted. I was trying to show you a picture of that. Yes, that was it. Science of Being Seen. I'll also have my Science of Being Seen books there for sale. Do pop along, if, as I say, if you possibly can. They're a tenner. They basically run through the current presentation. There are a few changes, as I've little tweaks to the presentation which haven't made it into the book yet, but basically the information is fundamentally sound in that book, and it tells you all about the Smidsy crash, why it happens, and what you can do to avoid it. The Smidsy, incidentally, of course, being one of the crashes in the top 10 accidents that I will be covering at a later date. So just to conclude today's forecast, there is actually an indication that there will be another spell of unusually hot weather that could be with us late next week and into the end of the month. So we can look forward to that. Right, okay, on with the news. Now, a story that broke yesterday, Grant Shapps is said to be considering a 20-mile-per-hour speed limit for cyclists. Now, the Transport Secretary had previously said that he would be creating a death by dangerous cycling law that will treat killer cyclists in the same way that motorists are treated. And he now says that, quote, since cyclists are actually not breaking the law when they speed, he proposes to extend speed limit restrictions to cyclists. Now, in an interview, this was mooted, and he said, particularly when you've got 20-mile-per-hour limits on increasing numbers of roads, cyclists can easily exceed those. So I want to make speed limits apply to cyclists. But there are further reaching consequences. He said that obviously does lead you into the question of, well, how are you going to recognize the cyclist? Do you need registration plates and insurance and that sort of thing? So I'm proposing there should be a review of insurance and how you actually track cyclists who do break the laws. Now, the Department for Transport reportedly refused to comment on these statements by Grant Shapps, but it did tell the Daily Mail that the Transport Secretary's measures would require cyclists to have number plates or other identification markings for enforcement purposes. Shapps continued by saying that he thought cycling was a fantastic way to travel, but that he saw, quote, no reason why cyclists should break the road laws, why they should speed, why they should bust red lights and be able to get away with it. I think we do have to not turn a blind eye to that, and I'm proposing setting up a review to do just that. Of course, with a new PM and a new government set to take control in just weeks, the chances that the sitting Transport Secretary will continue in that role must be fairly remote, I would have thought. So whether these proposals get any traction with the next government, I would say, is arguable. But it does link me fairly neatly into my next story, because if cycles do get registration plates and compulsory insurance, it's no big leap to see that other forms of micro-mobility will follow suit. And although e-scooters have become a common sight on the UK's roads, as yet there's no official word on exactly when the privately owned models commonly being ridden will be made legal on UK roads. Now, you'll recall there was an announcement back in May to say that privately owned e-scooters would be legalised for use on public roads and in cycle lanes in the UK as part of the government's new upcoming transport bill. But we will have to wait to see if that bill survives the current turmoil in the Conservative Party. But one point I made at the time was that in order to legalise the machines, it would be necessary to bring to an end the current sort of Wild West market where there are actually no checks on what's actually being sold. The current ban on these e-step scooters is simply on riding them on the public road. Now, as I said, there would have to be some standards, not just in terms of riding safety for those vehicles, but also fire safety. There have been several high-profile fires, including one on the tube network and another in a tower block, which was caused by these things bursting into flames. So it seems I'm not the only one thinking along these lines, as it's emerged that work is now underway to produce a new safety rating system. And this will cover the e-step scooters initially, but it's likely to be expanded to cover all e-bikes and other forms of micromobility. The standard, which is being created by the, quote, Micromobility Assessment Partnership, MMAP, has the Transport Research Laboratory as a partner, and it will likely be working in the same way as the Euro NCAP scheme does for cars, but with a wider scope to evaluate not just the safety of these devices, but also their sustainability and their social responsibility. So the scheme will ensure that whether it's a local authority who are looking to set up a sort of micro-mobility scheme, the e-step scooter hire schemes are an example of that, or whether it's a private buyer of a personal transport machine, the standard is going to be able to ensure that machines on sale or hired out are actually safe to use. And presumably, it would also make it easier to prosecute importers and retailers for distributing and selling substandard and non-approved machines. Now, there's no word, of course, when this standard will be ready, but if the government does legalise use of e-step scooters later this year, as announced, the partnership must be running on a fairly tight schedule, because there's only just over 4 months of the year left, of course. Right, we've got Clive looked in. Good morning. You're just in time. Right, so what was I going to say? Yes, so do set a reminder. The show goes out Wednesdays, it goes out on Sundays, it goes out at 11. It's almost always live. Very occasionally I have to do a recorded show, and even more rarely I will miss one due to other commitments. I may be up in the north of England in a few weeks, so I might have to do a recorded show for that one. Anyway, I'll come to that when I get to those dates. But yeah, do come along and catch up if you can, here on Facebook, of course, but far easier to do it on my YouTube channel, Survival Skills UK. Don't forget that all important UK on the end, where you can get all the ELEVENSES shows, but also 60-second safety and various other videos as well. So, right, that is the... I just pressed the wrong button again. Let's press that one. That is where you can catch up with the old shows. Now, over on TikTok, a biking dad has found himself in hot water after he posted a video of him taking his young daughter out on his bike, off to get a jacket for the latest rider. Now, apparently it was her first ride on the bike, and other people noted that he was wearing full leathers, but the child did have a helmet, but then she had no gloves and was clad in a denim jacket, trainers, and leggings that one respondent described as pajamas. And ironically, really, I suppose, the trip turned out to be a complete waste of time, as she went home without a jacket anyway, as they had to order one in her size. Now, Dad's responses to the criticism were defensive. He said, "Don't think we went past 30 miles per hour, but I knew these comments would come." Which begs the question, why post a video in the first place then? You know, what we choose to wear on the bike is our own decision, but when we're going to take a passenger, there's no excuse for not ensuring they at least have the option to be fully clothed. I mean, an adult, again, is capable of making their own decisions if they are fully informed of the risks. But I would really say that if you're carrying a young child on the passenger seat, you have to make the decisions for them, and that decision should be, they should be kitted out properly before going on the bike. So I can't help but think that was a journey that perhaps would have been better made in a car, or perhaps using a sidecar. Now, although I'm too young to remember at the time, apparently I made lots of trips in the sidecar on my granddad's old BSA outfit, but it's been quite a while since I actually last saw a sidecar outfit on the road. And with Ural, the wrong side of the Ukraine war divide, I'm not expecting to see any in the near future. But French bike manufacturer MASH do seem to be keen to reintroduce the mode of transport, at least over the other side of the channel. Now, these Chinese-made three-wheelers have appeared since 2017. They put the first one on the market, and in 2021, MASH released the Force, which has been quite popular apparently. It's a sort of military-inspired design, has a spare wheel on the boot, that kind of thing. No machine gun mount as far as I know, but hey-ho. But this particular model that you can see on screen at the moment is the MASH Black Side, and it's the latest of their range of sidecar outfits, and it's due to appear at the end of this month. Now, the tug on the left is MASH's 397cc single-cylinder four-stroke motor. It does put out a fairly lowly 27.6 horsepower at 7,000 RPM, but with the right gearing, there are 31 newton meters of torque at 5,500. It should move the 250 kilo outfit and 3 people reasonably briskly off the line, even if the top speed is likely to be fairly restricted. And although it gets discs all round, well, on all 3 corners, Those are on 18-inch wheels with knobbly tyres, but there is no drive to the sidecar wheel, something that the Ural benefits from for off-road use. But you do get a reverse gear for easy manoeuvring and a large storage compartment on the boot of the outfit. And you get those rather funky twin seat pads. I rather like those. Right, what about price? Well, it's expected to appear for a price of around €10,000. The Euro should give away one little issue. It's not expected to appear in the UK because that particular version has a sidecar on the wrong side for UK laws. If Mash were to bring sidecar outfit to the UK, they would have to produce a mirror image, and I can't see that happening, which is a bit of a shame, really. Right, moving on swiftly to the next bike. A mutt is a combination of different breeds, so perhaps it's no surprise that when the manufacturers of the range of mutt motorcycles are giving us a hint at what they are intending to build, when they say mutt bikes are different, we combine contemporary culture and creativity with heritage and quality, offering riders a fresh and individual take on motorcycles with our particular blend of vintage and modern characteristics. Hang on a moment, somebody at the door, be right back. Right, the perils are going live. Right, so where were we? Mutt motorcycles. Mutt bikes are different, they said. Combining contemporary culture and creativity with heritage and quality, offering riders a fresh and individual take on motorcycles with our particular blend of vintage and modern characteristics. Right, so how do they manage to offer an astonishing range of 19 different models from their 250 engine bike? There are only 17 125s to choose from, incidentally. Well, this is the Mongrel 250, by the way, which gives us a flavour of the market Mutt are aiming for, the rather ridiculously named Neo Retro end of the market. And it probably also explains why they are pushing an apparel angle too, via what they call a motorcycle lifestyle store, which includes, just to really hack me off, a Loud Pipes baseball hat. Ugh. Now, you probably guessed that the Birmingham-based company haven't managed this seemingly huge range by building multiple engine types and chassis. Now, almost all the range features this conventional twin shock frame that you can see in front of you. So the models are actually differentiated by altering sort of cosmetics, really. They get different tanks, different seats, different side panels, different exhausts, and different wheels and different headlights. Oddly enough, the bar position seems to stay exactly the same. There's one exception, and this is it. There are a pair of bikes called Razorbacks. There's a 125, this is a 125 incidentally, and a 250 with the engine that you've just seen. And these feature a modified frame with that monoshock rear end, which kind of gives it a slightly jacked up at the rear appearance, which conflicts, I think, fairly unpleasantly with that sort of drooping exhaust. I really dislike those exhausts which kind of point at the floor. Anyway, the air-cooled singles push out 12 brake horsepower for the 125 version, which is about par for the course. The 250 delivers a rather anemic 21 horsepower. That's 5 down on my 1980 Classic, the CB250 RSA, incidentally. Weight's reasonable. 125 is around 105 kilo. The 250 around about 130, which is much the same as my old Honda. Bikes get 18-inch wheels, just like my old Honda, in fact, with single discs at either end, and I believe ABS is fitted to the entire range, certainly fitted to the latest model. And there's LED lighting, of course. How much? Well, the 125 will set you back 3,495, and the 250s 4,350, except for the two brand new made for 2022 models, the GT-SR 125 and the GT-SR 250, which will set you back no less than I think it was, I forgot actually to look, 3,000, I can't remember, I'll have to double check that, but it's 4,500 for the 250, so £150 more expensive. I'd guess it probably about the same for the 125, plus on the road charges, of course. Right, so slightly shorter show than normal today because I've done a couple of really long ones just recently. So that leads us into today's better biking point. Now, what are the most common bike crashes? A story popped up on my newsfeed this morning telling me to give me some useful information about common motorcycle crashes. Now, I'm always keen to read these things, so I clicked on the link, and I wasn't too surprised, though, to discover it delivered me to a page of dubiously useful information, which was clearly set up to boost the ratings of an ambulance chaser webpage. Now, this was a US-based firm of motorcycle ambulance attorneys. So, but it did give me pause to thought. I thought I would actually begin to run a series that actually covers the top 10 crashes here in the UK. So this will run on Wednesdays for the next 10 weeks. So make a date to pop back and you'll hear the next item in this series next week. So where did I get my data from? Well, it's based on research I carried out some years ago, and I looked at official government figures. Now, the data set is admittedly a few years old, so there may have been a little bit of movement up and down the charts at the bottom end, but the favourite crashes simply don't change. They are the same year in, year out. Put us on bikes and we crash in pretty much the same way that we ever did. So, why my interest in crashing? Well, back in the summer of 1975, which seems like an incredibly long time ago, shortly before I was due to head off to university in London, I used some of the proceeds of my year out to purchase a brand new Honda CB125S. Not all that dissimilar from the Mutt, I suppose, we've just looked at, although rather prettier. 498 miles after collecting it. I remember this very precisely because I was taking it for its 500-mile service. I fell off it for the first time. Now, fortunately, I had fitted crash bars, so although the chrome took a beating, basically I saved the bike from anything, including cosmetic damage. I think there was a bit of a scratch to the handlebar lever and probably to the sort of rubber on the end of the twist grip or something. But basically I was okay. I've just had a few bruises, but it did turn out that crashing was to be something of a feature of my riding career over the next few years. Now, each time I did crash, I did try not to make the same mistake again, and mostly I did learn from experience. And fortunately for me too, the rate at which I crashed dropped off fairly dramatically with time. Now, obviously I'm still here to tell you about all this, but the worrying thing is that some of those crashes could have had fairly serious consequences. In fact, I was actually rather lucky that the only serious injury I've had from those crashes in those early days was actually a fractured arm. It's always worth reflecting on the words of an old buddy of mine, a chap called Don Kime. He was a MSF instructor. I don't know what he's doing now. He did go private. But he said years ago that riding a motorcycle is an exercise in disaster management. And he was absolutely right. We talk a lot about riding skills and riding better, but in fact, what we're really doing all the time we're out there riding is trying to avoid falling off. And I have to honestly admit that my early days, I really didn't make a very good job of it. So here is crash number 10 on my list of top 10 crashes in the UK. And it's running wide on a left-hand bend. Now, it's actually a fairly common error, but mostly we get away with it because when we do run wide on the left-hand bend, there's a nice bit of tarmac on the other side of the centre line. And many times we make this mistake. I hold my hand up. I've done this myself. The tarmac is empty. The trouble is that we're very quickly into an oncoming vehicle if there is something coming the other way. So although left-handers often feel friendlier to riders because of that illusion of space on the outside of us, when we do get it wrong, that empty space can be filled in an instant. And now we are liable to have a fatal collision. So when you look at crashes, the injuries from these accidents, they're relatively few, but they account for a significant number of fatal crashes. So what goes wrong? Where do we get it wrong on these bends? Well, there's actually a remarkable lack of understanding of how we can use road signs to help us. They are our first line of defense against the unexpected, because basically what signs do is tell you about a hazard that you can't see or may be hard to predict. So if there is a crash risk on a particular corner, there's nearly always a bend warning sign. And since these signs are put up in response to previous accidents, it's a very good clue that someone else got this corner wrong in the past. So it's simple. Slow down, look at the corner, and try and work out why other people got it wrong. It may turn out to be a lot trickier than you expected. And this is one of the other issues with bends generally. We cannot see around a corner, and that corner can get worse out of sight. So what we mustn't do is rely on what we see now to work out what is going to happen in a moment's time. We constantly hear about the limit point and how you set your speed to the limit point, but what if the bend is tightening up? That speed that you just set will now be too fast for the bend that is just out of sight. The limit point really isn't adequate for judging speed into tightening radius bends. By the time we discover the bend is tightening, we're already in it. So here's a tip. Look for black and white chevrons. They flag up the tightest part of a corner, the bit basically where most people are going to crash. You can see that for yourself by simply going for a ride and looking at the number of chevrons that are lying flattened in the ditch. So here's the tip. If you see a chevron partway through a corner that doesn't look too tricky, expect it to tighten up where you see the chevron. That is where people run off the road. So be aware too that combinations of bends don't have to be the same. There's often a tendency in riders to assume that if they're going into a combination of bends, they'll all be much the same radius. There's no guarantee of that at all. And there's always the possibility that the second bend will be tighter than the first. Look for a single bend warning sign as you go into that corner. If you're going into a right-hander and there's a left-hand bend warning sign, what it's telling you is just out of sight round the corner, there is a sharper left-hand bend, and you may not have time to get the speed off between the two. So get the speed off before you go into the first bend. Very simple, very easy solution to that problem. And another classic mistake to make is to forget that we are on the inside track, as it were, on a left-hand bend. On the right-hander, we're on the outside, so a wider radius. On the left-hander, we're on the inside track, so it's a narrower radius. So even if the two bends are identical in terms of radius, the line that we're going to take is going to be on a much tighter radius. So always factor that in when you see a right-left combination. And riders arrive too fast at corners. That is an all too common error. Now, why do we do that? Well, part of the reason, in my opinion, is that many riders are reluctant to use the brakes. There is this idea that good riders don't need the brakes. Good riders use whatever it takes. So if you're in any doubt about what that corner is going to do, if you've just seen, for example, that it's a double bend, a right and then a left, I would get on the brakes, because that left-hander could be tighter than the right-hander you're looking at. And you simply don't know, even if you're just looking at a plain left-hand bend, if it's going to tighten up out of sight. So get some speed off, go in with some caution, and be ready to add extra lean, which means two things that you need to know. Firstly, you have to know how you're going to get the bike leaning harder to turn on a tighter radius, which basically means you need to understand push to steer. And secondly, you need some lean angle in hand. If you are already scraping the undercarriage of the bike or getting your knee down, you aren't going to have anything in hand if that bend tightens up. So, final point for today. Cornering errors of all sorts are common on group rides, where riders are too close together, following the rider in front, riding a bit beyond their limits. Those are all reasons for errors on left-hand bends. If one rider gets it a bit wrong, the errors kind of stack up down the group as everybody else tends to get it wrong too. And sooner or later, somebody will be in over their head and they will crash. So my advice on a group ride, even if you're just riding with one buddy, sit back, ride your own ride, let them ride their ride, you make your own decisions. Now, if you do want to skip ahead and read the rest of the tips and slightly more detail as well, you can find them here. I'll just pop the link up for you. So the entire selection of books, inexpensive, free, are all available from my coffee shop there. And the Accident Top 10 is actually a free ebook. Right, just to finish off, there was actually one statement in that article for the biking attorneys that I did agree with, and that was actually a paragraph entitled "The Power of a Helmet." Now, I know there is still a lingering debate on the helmet laws here in the UK, and there is probably more of a debate in the US about it, but the figures are stark. Now, the US is actually a great place to see the positive effect of helmets, since they are legally required in most but not all states, which gives you a direct comparison between wearing a helmet and not wearing a helmet. And you can see the impact on fatalities and head injuries. The fact is that motorcyclists who wear a helmet have a 69% decrease in the risk of head injury and a 42% decrease in the risk of death in an accident. And that just shows you how many head injuries cause fatalities. And this is for data collected for riders wearing DOT approved helmets. Now, the DOT, Department of Transport standards, are considerably much lower than our own ECE 2205 and the newer 2206 standards. So bear that in mind too. We have better helmets over here than many of the riders will be wearing in the US. So, right, that is it for today. As I said, fairly short show today. I'll be back on Sunday with the next edition of Elevenses, but if possible, do pop along to see me at the Emergency Services Day. As I said, Robertsbridge Route 1066 Cafe on the A21 down in the direction of Hastings. And don't forget to pop the dates in your diary for the next couple of online events too. I'll be talking about, I've forgotten what I'm talking about actually. I'll just have to remind myself. The next one is, I just forgot to put the note up for that. Oh yes, Riding Systems, of course. That's September's live event. That's the 7th of September at 8 p.m. And in October, Science of Being Seen, In-Depth, Understanding Visibility, Conspicuity and Camouflage. So that's Wednesday, 5th of October. Tickets for those, both a £5. Do come along if you possibly can to either of those events, and once again the link to those events ticketing is here. Right, that is it. Thank you very much indeed for looking in again. Only a few people today have caught me live. Hopefully a few more will look in later. Maybe they're all out biking, taking advantage of the cooler weather while it lasts. And if you are, don't forget, stay shiny side up.